All right, let's jump right into another deep dive. We're looking at a really interesting source today. It's a transcript from a YouTube video exploring some core ideas in human psychology, stuff we probably all encounter.
That's right. And using this material you've shared, our plan is basically to unpack these concepts, not just define them, but really dig into what they mean for you in your day-to-day life. We want to pull out the key insights that might help you understand yourself and then maybe others a little better.
Yeah, and it covers things that feel, well, very real. Like, why do we sometimes have these huge emotional reactions that seem out of whack?
Right.
Or how can our own thoughts kind of trap us in a loop?
Or that pressure some people feel to always keep everyone happy, sometimes forgetting about themselves in the process.
Exactly.
Uh,
It feels like we're getting a look at some of those less obvious mental gears turning.
a peek behind the curtains, so to speak.
Okay, so where do we start? The source kicks off with a concept lots of people talk about, but it can feel a bit vague sometimes. The inner child.
Right. And the way the source frames it, it's not just, a cute metaphor. It's this idea that even as adults, certain emotions, needs, maybe even hurts from childhood, they don't just disappear. They can kind of remain stored unconsciously.
So if I, say, overreact to some small criticism today, that could actually be my inner child feeling threatened or something.
That's exactly the kind of thing the source points to. It suggests that inside the grown-up us, there might still be this part that feels vulnerable, maybe helpless, like a child needing care. Our bodies and minds grow up, but maybe some unmet needs or old fears get stuck.
And these can then pop up later.
Yeah, occasionally surfacing and impacting our adult emotions, how we react, our choices, even hindering our growth if we don't address them. It can reflect, as the source puts it, a kind of wounded childhood psychology.
Okay, so it's about recognizing this part, not dismissing it as being childish.
Precisely. It needs attention, maybe even healing.
Does the source give any clues on how to actually do that, how to engage with this inner child?
It does move into practical ideas, suggesting that to really mature fully, we shouldn't let that inner child stay trapped in the past. It talks about confronting those unmet needs, looking at maybe difficult or traumatic memories that are still hanging around.
Confronting them. You mean like consciously acknowledging them, validating those old feelings.
That seems to be the idea, bringing awareness to it. The source actually gets quite specific, suggesting you could try talking to your inner child internally. It even offers phrases like, "Thank you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, and I love you."
Wow.
Yeah, like tending to that part of yourself that needed something back then. A way to nurture it, maybe.
That's a powerful way to think about it. Okay, let's shift from that internal landscape to something else many people struggle with, especially when things get quiet. Negative rumination.
Yes, dwelling. The source paints a vivid picture, constantly replaying confusing memories, painful moments, failures, regrets. When you're alone or trying to sleep, it's like these thoughts are shadows just stuck on repeat.
Reinforcing sadness, low self-esteem.
Exactly. It's not just thinking about a problem once. The source defines it psychologically as excessively reviewing negative experiences and feelings. That repetitive, stuck quality is key.
And it sounds like the source really stresses how serious this can be.
It calls it a form of serious internal emotional conflict. It can feel like these thoughts just invade your mind, no matter the time or place, just replaying the bad stuff.
What does that do to someone long term?
Well, the source says it can make people feel trapped in past suffering, unable to move on, control their thoughts, or even solve current problems effectively. And critically, it points to research showing that people prone to rumination are actually more likely to suffer from depression.
Okay, so it's more than just a bad habit, it's a potential risk factor.
Definitely. Which makes finding ways out really important.
What does the source suggest? How can you break that cycle?
The advice seems to center on shifting focus. So instead of getting lost in why things went wrong before, try to bring your attention to the present. Ask yourself, okay, what am I feeling right now? What's happening around me?
Grounding yourself in the present.
Yes. And combining that with actively engaging in new things that might be distracting, maybe even enjoyable. The source mentions playing soccer, visiting an art exhibit, anything, really, to stimulate your brain differently.
Like giving your mind something else to chew on.
Exactly. Potentially releasing some dopamine, finding new joys, and basically disrupting that negative feedback loop. Actionable steps.
That makes sense. Okay, let's pivot now to something interpersonal, a dynamic that, thankfully, we're talking about more openly these days. Gaslighting.
A really insidious form of manipulation. The source gives some pretty blunt examples of gaslighting statements. Things like, your outfit is really bad, or your ability is truly poor. Even just flat out, you'll never amount to anything.
Horrible things to hear.
Mm.
And the source explains that if you're subjected to that kind of intentional denial over a long period,
And you start to actually believe it. You
Yeah.
start agreeing with their denial,
Yeah.
seriously doubting your own perception, your memories, your worth. The source says you've basically been chronically poisoned by these tactics.
and the term itself, it actually comes from a movie, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. From that old 1944 thriller, Gaslight, it perfectly captured that act of messing with someone's perception of reality, that emotional and psychological abuse.
How does the manipulator actually pull it off? How do they erode someone's self-trust like that?
Well, the source explains it's usually pressure applied over time. The manipulator intentionally feeds the victim false or biased information, skewed interpretations, and crucially, it often happens under this guise of innocence or concern or just trying to help.
Which must make it incredibly confusing for the person experiencing it.
Totally disorienting. So over time, the victim starts doubting themselves, denying their own experiences, losing trust in their own judgment. It chips away at their ability to gauge reality.
Leading to really low self-esteem, negative emotions.
Absolutely. And what's particularly chilling, as the source points out, is that the people doing this are often very close to the victim.
Romantic partners, family, friends.
Yes, and they often try to justify it, twist it into some form of love or caring.
Ugh. That twisted logic must make it so hard to see clearly. The source also mentioned a broader psychological point here.
It did. It notes that some psychologists actually suggest that a lot of people's issues with low self-esteem might stem from years of this kind of psychological abuse, often starting within their own families.
That really puts the potential long-term impact into perspective. So, if someone realizes they might be experiencing this, what can they do? What does the source offer in terms of resistance or coping?
It lays out some clear strategies. First, and maybe hardest, is trying to maintain a firm, independent stance. Trust your own perception, your gut feeling about what's real, even when they deny it. Protect your self-esteem.
Don't let their reality overwrite yours.
Exactly. Second, broaden your horizons. Increase your relationships. Talk to other trusted people. Get outside perspectives. Don't let the manipulator be your only source of information. Ground yourself.
So, build a reality check network.
Kind of, yeah. Third, have the courage to make mistakes. Gaslighters often pounce on errors to undermine you. Accepting that you're not perfect actually takes away some of their power. And fourth, very importantly, the source strongly advises seeking professional help from a psychological counselor.
Getting expert support.
Yes, they can offer validation, tools, and strategies to navigate this really damaging dynamic.
Those are vital steps for a really tough situation. Let's shift now to another pattern, one that can look like kindness on the surface but might hide insecurity: the people pleaser.
Yeah. Does this sound familiar to you? The source describes someone who always puts friends first, can never say no to a request, stays up all night talking a friend through a crisis even when they're exhausted, constantly sacrificing their own needs.
And often feeling like it's never really appreciated.
Exactly. That feeling of giving and giving, but maybe not getting genuine gratitude back.
It's a pattern many people fall into. What does the source suggest is going on underneath?
Well, interestingly, it loops back to that inner child idea again. The source proposes that deep down, people pleasers often have an unsatisfied inner child with unmet needs. There's this intense craving for safety, for recognition from others, maybe something they didn't get enough of earlier on.
So the people-pleasing is kind of a strategy to earn that safety and recognition now.
That seems to be the mechanism described. They feel maybe unconsciously inadequate, like nobody really likes them for just being them. And that fear makes it terrifying to refuse someone or to ask for their own needs to be met, so they just keep compromising.
And the source is pretty blunt about the downside of living like that.
It puts it starkly, yeah.
Mm.
Saying that this constant compromising and trying to please everyone is basically like giving the world permission to hurt you. You're signaling your boundaries are weak, that others always come first.
Which must lead to a lot of internal conflict, right? Resentment, maybe?
Definitely. The source calls it a potentially unhealthy behavior that easily breeds internal conflict.
So what's the way out, according to the source? What's the advice for someone stuck in that pattern?
It starts with something that's often really hard for people pleasers to accept. You simply cannot be liked by everyone. It's impossible. The source emphasizes that everyone has their own unique value inherently that doesn't depend on chasing approval.
So stop chasing.
Not chasing. and instead turn inward. The advice is learn to love yourself first. Get comfortable being you with your own strengths, weaknesses, needs, boundaries. Be strong and unique. The source suggests that only then does life really find its meaning, separate from what others think.
That self-acceptance piece feels crucial. Okay, moving on, the source also tackles a really frustrating dynamic. People with double standards.
Oh, yeah. We've all met them, haven't we? These are the folks who have, well, inconsistent ways of judging things. They'll evaluate basically the same situation or person differently, purely based on their own preferences or what benefits them in the moment.
So it's like one rule for me and my friends, another rule for you.
Pretty much. The source says the essence of it is just a clear expression of self-serving bias.
Can you give us some of those classic examples the source uses?
Sure. The typical ones involve how they explain success and failure. Their success, oh, that's down to their talent, their hard work, their failure. Well, that was bad luck, or external circumstances totally beyond their control.
Right.
And they see their own actions as correct. They're super forgiving of themselves and people they like. But boy, are they harsh on people they don't like. Totally different standard.
That sounds incredibly unfair to deal with, and just confusing.
It is. The source acknowledges it's hard to avoid running into people like this. And even if they don't mean to be malicious, interacting with them is just uncomfortable because you never know where you stand. There's no consistency.
So what's the advice? Just try to steer clear.
Primarily, yes. The source suggests actively trying to avoid getting too deeply involved with people who consistently operate with double standards. But, and this is important, it immediately follows that up with a reminder for self-reflection.
Checking ourselves.
Yeah. Exactly. Keep an eye on your own thinking to make sure you aren't slipping into double standards yourself. It's a bias we can all fall prey to if we're not careful.
That's a really good point. Okay, let's switch gears to something very relevant in today's world. Burnout.
Burnout syndrome. The source really captures that feeling, that sense of dread about work, not wanting to go in, maybe complaining about it all the time, finding it harder and harder to focus on things you used to handle easily.
And it connects it to that push-through mentality some people have.
Yeah.
Especially maybe younger folks.
That's right. Pulling all-nighters, constant overtime, thinking you're invincible. But the source notes that even while doing that, there's often this underlying anxiety about limits. You think you can endure, but your body and mind might be screaming otherwise.
So what's the actual state of burnout? What does it feel like fundamentally?
The source describes it as profound exhaustion, physical, mental, emotional, just depleted. And often, alongside that exhaustion, there's this struggle to find meaning or purpose even outside of the stressful situation. It defines it as extreme fatigue caused by prolonged excessive stress.
Just completely drained on all levels.
Yeah.
What can people do if they feel like they're heading towards burnout or already there? What strategies does the source offer?
The advice focuses on managing the pressure and finding ways to recharge. One suggestion is to consciously try and reduce your sense of responsibility. Like, don't feel you have to carry the weight of the world. Do what's realistically within your capacity.
Okay, scale back the must do everything feeling.
Oh, right. Another strategy is to actively seek out meaning and enjoyment in other parts of your life. Hobbies, relationships, interests, things that actually nourish you, not just drain you.
Reclaiming your energy from other sources.
Exactly. And crucially, learn to rest. Really rest, relax, let go of the constant pressure, recognize that recovery isn't lazy, it's necessary. And finally, the source puts forward a tough one. If the work situation itself is genuinely more harmful than beneficial, if it's really damaging your physical and mental health, consider quitting. Consider a fresh start. Sometimes removing yourself from the source of chronic stress is the necessary step.
That's important validation for people in really bad spots.
Ah.
Okay, our final concept from the source today is a serious one. Bipolar disorder.
Yes, and the source highlights a really striking symptom right away. Those intense, unpredictable mood shifts. It uses the image of someone maybe crying uncontrollably, then suddenly bursting into loud laughter, or the other way around. That feeling of losing control, being on the edge between joy and sorrow.
And the source is clear. Frequent, sudden, extreme emotional changes like that warrant attention.
Absolutely. It cautions that these could be a sign of bipolar disorder.
It's also known by another name, isn't it?
Yes, historically it was often called manic depressive illness. That name really points to the two poles of mood involved. And the source underlines its severity. Sadly, it's one of the mental illnesses with the highest rates of suicide.
That's incredibly serious. The source uses an analogy to help understand the experience.
It does. It contrasts a typical person's emotions, maybe like a gently flowing stream, with the emotions in bipolar disorder, which it compares to violent, unpredictable waves crashing fiercely, coming and going intensely. It captures that lack of control.
And it can be harder to spot than something like depression.
That's a key point the source makes. Because the highs, the manic phases, can sometimes look like high energy or productivity, people around the person might not recognize the suffering. They might dismiss the episodes, both high and low, as just emotional issues or personality quirks.
When does it usually start to show up?
The source mentions it primarily develops in early adulthood. The research data it cites suggests the average age of onset is somewhere between 18 and 25.
Given how serious it is and that it can be hard to detect, what's the advice if you think you see these signs in someone you know?
The advice is really direct and important. First, offer reassurance. Let the person know you've noticed something's going on and you're there for them. Don't judge. Second, and this is critical, promptly help them get professional medical help. Like, go to a hospital or a mental health professional.
Getting them assessed properly.
Yes. The source really emphasizes that the care, the understanding, the attention from others, that's a huge motivation for patients trying to find stability and escape that extreme hot and cold cycle.
That really highlights how vital support networks and professional help are.
Absolutely. Early recognition and support can truly change the trajectory.
Wow. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground today digging into this source material. We went from the hidden vulnerabilities of the inner child, through the mental traps of rumination, the complexities of gaslighting and double standards, the exhausting pattern of people-pleasing, the modern plague of burnout, and the intense reality of bipolar disorder.
It's quite a spectrum, and exploring these different facets based on what the source shared really can shed light on some of the whys behind how we act, how we feel, and how others around us might be behaving too.
Yeah, it's not just theory, is it? It feels like gaining a more nuanced toolkit for understanding the messiness and complexity of the human mind.
Hmm.
Maybe a shortcut to navigating things with a bit more awareness, maybe even more compassion.
And sometimes just having a name for an experience like rumination or gaslighting can be incredibly validating. It helps make sense of something that might have just felt confusing or overwhelming before.
Definitely. So as we wrap up, thinking about this whole range we've explored from our deep internal states to our tricky interactions with others, maybe something to ponder is this. How might simply recognizing and being able to name even just one of these concepts, say the inner child's needs, or the pull of rumination, or spotting potential gaslighting, how might that awareness shift your perspective on a recent interaction you had, or maybe a feeling you've been wrestling with?